So thank you ever so much for doing this, Vickie.
My pleasure.
The first question then is just around, so you've worked with a number of different large organisations in the last few years. Just a question around whether or not you're encountering the same types of challenges or whether each of those organisations has very distinct sets of obstacles to overcome from a cyber perspective.
Absolutely. So I think each organisation faces the same type of challenge. Sometimes it's just about timing. So they might be a little bit further down their implementation journey, but the same things tend to come up time and time again. Interestingly, I had a conversation with somebody quite recently who, from an awareness point of view, had embedded awareness in the organisation and felt as if the culture was really shifting, but then there was a change of leadership and they felt like they had to start that process all over again. So the same things, and timing makes a big difference, and change makes a big difference too.
Do you typically find that the person who's identifying the challenges, the priorities at a strategic level for the organisation, are they necessarily the same person, or do they have the necessary skill set to drive those changes through at more of a perhaps operational and cultural level?
That's a great question, and I think again it depends on the size of the organisation often, and the size of the cybersecurity team as to whether it is the same person. Certainly in larger organisations, you mentioned cultural change, so if there's a change management function, a business change management function in particular, I would expect that those people would be heavily involved in cultural change. So there might be a whole team, it might be a project, it might be a program, and you might have several people connected. Within your cybersecurity team, you might have more strategic people, architectural people, operational people. Depends on the size, I think.
In terms of developing the right team internally, are there any particular principles that you would universally apply within each of those organisations that you've played a role in?
That's a good point. I think never rule anything or anybody out, because you do need a blend of skills. You do need the people that are going to diligently sit there and work through your logs, but equally you do need the people that are going to go out and connect with the whole of the organisation and find out what's going on. And then come and feed that back in to the strategy. People with experience are great, but never rule out fresh and vibrant people as well. I think that's really important. In the past, it was traditionally a subject that people thought was quite dull. I don't understand that. I think it's fantastic. But I think now, because of the media, because of the stories that have been out in the news, I mean, crikey, I'm just thinking about Google as one of them recently. I think it's become more of a sexy topic and it's more appealing to people that are sort of coming up through education. So whereas before they might have traditionally gone into a broader digital or IT role, they might find that they're looking to cybersecurity as to develop their whole career.
Just going back to a point you mentioned a moment ago, are there maybe sometimes some benefits to actually bringing on board people who are a little bit fresher, perhaps a little bit newer to it from a cultural perspective, in that there's something of a blank canvas? What are the kind of pros and cons to each of those options?
So bringing somebody in that's already from within the organisation, I think that does have its benefits, because if you want to land behavioural change from a security point of view, understanding the organisation is paramount to getting that right. You need a bit of both, essentially. Too much of one and you're going to miss opportunities. I think that you'll get from, as you say, the more malleable, fresher person. And, dare I say it, just thinking about my own demographic, we need people that are younger, particularly because the channels are changing, technology is changing. I certainly don't understand how to use certain media anywhere near as much as, for example, my 13-year-old daughter. So I need people to tell me where things are going so that I can communicate with the audience in the right way. And certainly, a company that I've been working with recently, for example, their workforce are very young, but at the board level and the non-exec director level, they're a different demographic again. So there's a completely different way of communicating with those two, influencing in terms of where do you spend your money, what's important, why it's important. And having the younger demographic explain it to somebody like me means that we can then communicate and influence. Otherwise, there's no opportunity to do so. And then in the worst case, you're opening up the organisation to unquantifiable risks because you actually haven't got an understanding of how people are using technology.
With the different organisations in which you've worked in the last few years, how easy are you finding it to be to get cyber? Is it already on the agenda every single board meeting? Is it something that you have to fight quite hard to get it high up that list? What's your experience with that?
That's a really good point. I think generally it's already on the list, but how much airtime it has really depends on what it is that you've got to say and who's in the room. I think it's really important not to go overboard with any topic that you put in front of the board, right? You know, they've only got a finite amount of time. So if you want to have something to say, make sure it's the right thing to say. In my experience, I found that if you've got somebody that sits on or close to the board, having a conversation with them in advance of any board session means that you'll pitch it, whatever it is you want to say, it will be framed in the right way. People will have already had the discussion potentially on the subject before, and then you can just go in and get it rubber stamped. So I think, dare I say it, the days of kind of going in and scaring the board with those cybersecurity, we're all going to be hacked and our reputation will be ruined, I don't think that is actually necessary anymore. What they want to know now is, okay, we probably gave you some money to go ahead and fix that. What's our risk? What's the likelihood of it happening to us? Where are we now? So I suppose in conclusion, they're getting better at holding people to account on what they've actually said that they were going to do. I think they're less afraid. Perhaps a few years ago they didn't really understand the subject as much as they do now, but they're less afraid of actually going and asking questions and challenging. So I think although the CISO's probably got more of an open door, they might have quite a challenge in really presenting risk reduction, which sometimes it's quite tricky to do in that area.
It's one thing, I guess, going into an organisation and looking at the way that they do things or have done things for several decades and reviewing their kind of risk on that basis. But how much more difficult is it when an organisation, as is increasingly the case, is going through a major kind of broader digital transformation, which I suppose must introduce all new sorts of levels of uncertainty and unknowns? Is that an additional challenge that you're encountering?
In one way, but actually it can present a fantastic opportunity, because it means that if you get it right and you get into the programme as early as possible and understand the requirements, then you can build security in from the start and demonstrate potentially a significant cost saving across the organisation by doing that. So you can really get in and say, this is how we're going to reduce risk. We're going to leverage the plans that you already have, the tools that you are already employing to do security really well. And that's got to be music to the ears of the board.